So what do I mean? That I'm always eager to learn more, to find more. So photography, it helps me to discover things that I don't know yet. So I'm using it not to say something. Maybe I'm not smart enough to actually go to the world and say, you know what, I found out this big truth that now I'm going to share with you. But I'm more like, why don't we take some time and we think more deeply about this? Because I'm not sure, you know? And so every project I do is about things that I'm usually torn about, like religion, being a woman, being mortal. If you look at all my projects, they're always about something that I struggle with.
Welcome to the show, Nausicaa.
Thank you so much, Patrick.
I'm so glad to have you on. I've been in your world recently, just kind of diving into your work, and I really enjoyed what I saw. I really enjoy the images that you are able to produce, and then I also really enjoy the writing that you do. And I think you're just going to add so much to the conversation that we have here on the show. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
All right, just to begin, for those that don't know you, go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
Okay, I'm Nausicaa Guila Bianchi, and I'm a documentary photographer. I studied in the States. I studied in 2010 at ICP in New York. So I started out as a reportage, straight documentary photographer, but then my passion for fine art grew more and more through the years. And today I'm working more on a fine art documentary project with a large format camera. I'm also an educator. When I moved back from the States to Italy, which is my original country, I actually founded a school that is called The Soul and the Machine. And I think the name says a lot about my way to see photography. And I'm very glad to be here.
I love that name. I think the soul of the machine. There's just something about that name that I really enjoy. The things that you think about, the stuff that you write about is really interesting to me, and I have tons of questions. But before we go there, let's dive into how you made your way into art. Were you always an artistic person? What were you like before you did art?
Well, I actually arrived to photography pretty late because it was in my mid-20s. My first love was actually writing. And when I was 6 years old, I told my parents that I was going to be like the biggest writer of, the world. So I was very ambitious and I was very driven to literature, Russian literature a lot, even if I was really young. But my parents, were a very normal family. I grew up in Italy. I grew up in Genoa. That was a very sketchy city at that moment. And I remember that I was less than 10 years old and I was already stealing stuff. I was punching boys in the face and I was pretty rough. So they moved outside of the city in the hills, in the countryside, trying to save me from becoming,
Oh my
some sort of
gosh.
dangerous human being.
What a
Yeah, it's true. It's
what
true.
a story.
Yeah. Like I was arrested by the police, and I was a baby.
Wow.
Yes. So when
I
I
was
told
not
them that I was
expecting that.
going to be an artist, I was going to to do literature. They didn't take me seriously, and because I was good at school, they said, you know what, girl, if you want to be free, you'll have to find the real job. What is this art nonsense? And I understand why they said so. So I went to study mathematics, and I became an expert in computer science. I started working in telecommunication, and I did for 12 years. But I mean, I enjoyed it at first because it allowed me to travel a lot all around the world. I saw India, Morocco, Japan. I lived in Turkey. So it changed me. That job really changed me. But on the other side, I was uh, I was feeling hungry, like my soul were really down, and I felt I was living the life
Hmm.
of another person, but I didn't even
Oh
know
yeah.
who she was.
I feel you so much. That is such a relatable story to me. Like I have a very similar story, but I don't want to dive into it. So continue.
And when I managed to have a good salary, I saved everything. And after a couple of years, I quit my job. I moved to the States, and I told myself, you know what? I'm gonna give you, Nausicaa, a second chance to be happy and to be fulfilled in this life. And so that's what I did. And nobody believed it. Like, nobody could believe it. Like, what? Are you really going to lose this great job and all the opportunities that are open up for you? And I had no doubts, but I really had to do it. But surprisingly, instead of choosing literature, that was my first love, I actually picked photography because traveling a lot, it was very normal for engineers and people in computer science to actually do photography because it's something you do with a machine. And I don't know why, but all my colleagues loved photography, so I actually got photography from them, from computer science people, engineers. But through the years, she became my best friend. I would spend a lot of time traveling alone, and I would be always with my camera. At first, doing travel pictures like everybody else, and then suddenly, I think she really went under my skin because I used it to go through everything that I was thinking. It was like a tester, like like a mirror in a way, but also like a research tool. It was special from the very first moment. I think I did one day photographing flowers in the park, and the second day I wrote on my diary, this is going to be the most amazing tool to understand what is
Mm.
reality.
You are
I found this.
you're personifying the camera. You're like giving it a persona. You're giving it a name. Like she is it like
Oh,
a friend of yours?
yes,
Is it
it's a
uh,
friend. I even give
you do?
names to my cameras. So the last one is called
Okay.
Berenice.
I like that name. That's a pretty good one. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yes,
But you're talking about this tool to kind of engage reality,
yes.
are you using it to kind of understand yourself?
No,
Okay,
actually, I have to say I would use it to escape by myself.
interesting.
This was also my problem with the moment I was going through in writing. That it was like hearing the echo of my voice over and over again, and I was tired of myself. I wanted to get out of myself. I needed to get to know new things, and photography gave me that. You know, with a camera in my hands, I would not make a self portrait in my room, but I was driven to actually go and make things happen for me. So it was like an experience machine. I'm not saying this is true, Like it's not, I'm not saying this is what has to be literature or photography for everybody. I'm just saying that at that moment, for me, photography was more appealing because it forced me to get out of myself. And also, I understood that in writing, I would find in my sentences only what I put there. But in photography, the camera was smarter than me. She could record all sorts of things I didn't know and I had to catch up with it. Like I had to get better at reading what she was showing. And so I was frustrated at first in photography because I would see that I was superficial or that I was not brave or I was, falling into cliche. She was showing back to me that I was not mature enough. So she was a teacher, but on the other side, she was also really like a master, like a teacher,
That's really, really interesting. Is
forcing
it,
me to do things that I wouldn't do.
uh, I think it's fascinating. Is that kind of, I keep coming back to this idea of personifying this machine. And is this what you mean by the soul of a machine? Is this what you mean by that?
Ah, um, well, this name came in my mind many times through the years, also in a very intuitive way. It was some sort of jingle in my head, like the soul in the machine. Like I have a machine, but with this machine is allowing me to actually use my soul. Is a device for my soul, and so I was fascinated by this meeting, of my interiority, but also of this machine. I think the machine is important to me.
I think that's fascinating. There's many religions that talk about that all of matter has some kind of energy or soul that's associated with it, and their functions in some ways kind of point to the nature of that energy and or soul. So I think it's really, really interesting. And I think a machine definitely has a soul. Like I used to name my cars. Like I could tell if it was a male or a female, and it was. I had many different names for tools and machines, and I named my plants like I have Thomas the cactus like right over here. And so, but going into that point a little deeper, you you feel connected to the world in this way. And my question is have you always been connected that way? How did you find your way to understanding the world like that? It's like there's not a lot of people that actually kind of get like that. You know, we all feel kind of separated from everything, but there is energy and we're all connected to everything. And I've come to that kind of realization. So I'm
Well,
curious how you got there.
I've
Do you understand what I'm
yeah
asking
yeah
here?
yeah yeah. Yeah, first time I got asked this question, so I'm thinking about
Yeah,
it.
I'm kind of a
Uh,
deep
I have
guy,
to
and I
say,
think this way. And so I'm always kind of curious how people get there themselves. So yeah, I'm
okay,
I'm I'm deeply curious. So
well, probably I think in general I'm fascinated by our relationship to
mhm.
things, not objects, but in general everything. I studied also oil painting, for example, and I think the connection to the material, into the material world and surfaces and pigments and paper and wood or clay. I mean, all those sort of things really fascinated me. I was the kind of kid that you can, give anything to her, and she would deconstruct it and reconstruct it back, and like every material is like music, and you can work with it. So this definitely, because I'm fascinated by any kind of art, any material. And I was probably fascinated by computers, because when my father said, you gotta get a real job, I picked computer science for myself. So probably I was fascinated by the mystery of these complicated machines. And I see that today, for example, that I use a large format camera, so it doesn't have any button, it doesn't have electricity, but to me, it's so important also the way I touch it. I'm not just taking a film holder and throwing it like this, boom, inside. I'm opening it. It's like a dance.
Hmm.
I'm fascinated by the gestures that human beings do when it comes to material. So how you relate to the material, and also the machines.
It's interesting. So, what got you to ICP? I'm kind of curious how you made your way there. It sounds like you're interacting with photography in a really interesting way, and you are kind of evolving. But you see ICP and you're like, I need to go there. So, why did you pick ICP?
At first, I wanted to go to Kapke in Netherlands, because I wanted to do a fine art academy. But again, I thought, if I'm gonna, because I have this, let's say, it's like you have two arms. One is super strong and the other one is very weak. What do you think you should train? I thought I had to train my weakest side. It was journalistic, documentary, learn how to get into people's lives. I was not very brave. I was afraid of anything, even my own shadow. So I thought that, I didn't want photography to become a comfort zone like I did with the writing. I turned it into a comfort zone. It is the worst thing you can do with any kind of art. And so I picked the school that again was gonna force me out of my comfort zone and was gonna train me to be braver and to be more connected to the stories of other people around me. And also in the last years, so let's say from 2006 to 2010, I wanted to be more socially concerned.
Hmm.
It's something that really grew inside me, that I wanted to change the world. Not there is this sentence that a friend of mine told me a few years ago. He said, what do you want to do you want to change the world, or do you want to save your own soul? Because if you want to save your soul, go fuck yourself. But if you want to change the world, I'm going to help you. And when he said so, I was shocked, because I think that this was the way I thought about my life for a
Wow.
long time. I just didn't have the words for it. I went to ICP because I didn't want to save my soul. I wanted to change the
Mm.
world. And I know it's a lot of the things that probably we're going to touch today are impossible. Like, really know what is reality, what is truth, change the world. But I love to think that I can work on that instinct, on that impulse, uh, documentary impulse, a social concern impulse, because the values are very important. They can drive us in very different places.
For sure. Yeah.
Mm.
So you picked ICP and you, so did you continue your education after that, or did you just jump right in
After
to photography and started photographing?
after
Yeah.
ICP, well, I went to study oil painting at the New York Students Art League. But it's not if like a master in fine art. It's almost the opposite. Like, I don't care what you think. You just have to learn to draw very well. You know, and I kind of liked it. because I wanted the skills. I was already spending a lot of time with my brain, and I wanted to use my hands more and more and more. But also, I went to study at the Philosophy Institute in Brooklyn. I studied feminism, and I did the sculpture with clay. I went to the Jungian Institute to study a bit more about psychoanalysis. I went even to do a course for drawing comics because I told myself, oh, you know what? With photography, we do so little about editing and narratives. Maybe those people knows more because we have to put pictures together, right? So I was very curious. I went to see a lot of different schools and places for another couple of years.
That's great. That really is great. So I'm curious. So is there any artist out there, anybody that inspires you, somebody that we should be looking at?
Well, many. I'm gonna maybe tell you just a few of them. One is Kiki Smith from New York City. She worked with photography, but she worked with any kind of material. And what I really loved was this kind of metamorphosis. You have an idea, and you have this idea clashing on one material. And then you take it and you push it towards something different. For example, you go from clay to drawing, from drawing to performance, from performance to etching, from etching to photography. And every time, because the idea is to get inside the materials, is changing. And so I remember I really loved her. And then I loved the arte povera artists, people like Alighiero Boetti or Luciano Fabro, because again, I could see um, our sensibility and our ideas shaping the world, uh, and less was more. You had to work on synthesis, and you had to ask yourself continuously: does it really matter? Is it really important for us? Does it say something to me? Um, and they definitely were against capitalism and against illustrations, decorations, pretty things that mean
Mm.
nothing. And so this really appealed to me.
So are you, do you think that in some ways that your work kind of challenges things? You aim to challenge narratives and challenge ideas. What kind of topics do you feel like, or ideas that you feel like you're drawn to that challenge certain things?
I well, I don't I don't know if I think about my work as challenging other things. I mean, I know for sure I always want to challenge stereotypes, but because stereotypes are silliness and racism, you know, and they do not allow you to actually understand what you don't know yet. So I know I'm definitely always want to challenge stereotypes and cliché. Um, on the other side, I think that my yes are more important than my no's. So what do I mean? That I'm always eager to learn more, to find more. So photography, it helps me to discover things that I don't know yet. So I'm using it not to say something. Maybe I'm not smart enough to actually go to the world and say, ah, you know what, I found out this big truth that now I'm going to share with you. But I'm more like, why don't we take some time and we think more deeply about this? Because I'm not sure, you know? And so every project I do is about things that I'm usually torn about, like religion, being a woman, being mortal. If you look at all my projects, They're always about something that I struggle with. And I'm using the project to discover more that I don't know.
Take us into this first project and give us a little bit of a background on it. And you said this is one of the first complete projects that you had done. So give us a little bit of the story behind that and how you made your way into that, and kind of tell us a little bit about that.
When I did ICP, I think I picked one of the worst possible project that I could ever picked, because I was an Italian woman in her 30s, uh, and I was heterosexual, but I went to photograph LGBT community and drag queens and transgenders. And at school, they told me many times, you're not supposed to do that. It's silly. Why would you do that? Those are not your people. You don't understand what's happening. And but it was really powerful because I learned on my skin what is there, how difficult it is to get inside people's lives, and especially to understand what they live, how they feel, what moves them, and so on. From that project, I went to another project that was about a woman living in New York, and she was a feminist, but she was also an activist, and it was a way to live feminism that was very painful. She worked in a place for women that are abused. She kept a diary, and she brought me to meetings where people would teach me how to use a gun to protect myself. Uh, and I think those two projects, the LGBTI and this, let's say, violent, dark feminism bubble that I was in, really prepared me for looking for something else that would heal my wounds. In both my previous small project or attempts of projects, I was investigating, the same things. Um, what define us, who are we, how can I become an adult, which are the values that are driving us, our relationship to groups, for example, and how we identify in certain groups. But I felt that both the scenarios that I investigated give me negative answers. Like I was not. I was even more torn than when I started. Tell me if it's clear. you
Oh,
know.
yeah.
But like I
You're
was
totally
dealing
clear.
with failure.
I think you're on to
Okay,
something.
my
Yeah,
subjects
yeah.
were failing a big time. They were suffering a big time. Um, and one day, I was looking at local newspapers. I was living in Chicago, and I read that a Catholic woman, was a priest, and she was doing a baptism to a baby. And I laughed and I said, you know what? This is crazy. Like this guy at the newspaper, he doesn't know what he's saying because it's impossible. No Catholic woman can be a priest. This is forbidden ever. And but then it bothered me the day after that I never actually asked myself why in the Catholic Church women cannot be priests. As I grew up in that religion and I witnessed it for many years, and this never occurred to me. So now I'm going to do like a newspaper piece on one of them, and I'm gonna sell it to the Time or the New York Times, because I'm a good feminist. A feminist. That's what I told myself. Okay, it's gonna be like a, don't know, 1 week job. I flew to Atlanta when one of them was leaving, and actually, my 1 week project for the New York Times, it became an 8 years project for Nausicaa Guila Bianchi. And it's funny because I was so cynical about it at the beginning. I was like, this old lady is uncool. I came from New York with this amazing, hair, asymmetrical, and a black leather jacket and boots, and holding my cameras like, I'm this New York photographer. Um, and after a week, I was just crying at her place, and and why did I cry? Because I found one of the most amazing human beings I never met. She was an amazing woman. It doesn't matter the religion. She was a lot of things that I was looking for, and she was a success. She was not a failure. She set up herself for freedom. She didn't want to give up tradition, but she was challenging tradition. She was not afraid to disobey and to bring change and to be a leader in our community. And and I fell in love with her. And I stayed 2 weeks at her place, and then I asked her if she knew anybody else like her that I could meet. And she said, "Okay, I'm gonna drive you to Kentucky, and I'm gonna introduce you to another woman, and see, maybe you like her and you want to photograph her." Well, I did this 75 times, driving from
Wow.
one woman to another woman, and every time feeling fed.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And feeling I was really meeting a role model for a
Hmm.
person, socially concerned, strong, independent, knowledgeable. One of them had worked for the CIA. They did all sorts of things, and people often ask me, okay, why is it possible that you find this group of people and you say that most of them, at least, are such peculiar human beings, are brave human beings, are challenging human beings, ready to go to jail, ready to step up, for people that are weak or sick. I think that their peculiar story actually was a sort of a filter. These are women that were in the Catholic Church, old women. They entered in a seminary in the 60s thinking they could become priests because the church was changing at the time. The Roman Catholic Church was changing. But then nothing happened. The Catholic Church didn't change that much and never allowed women to become priests. So they spent most of their times working inside the church in different roles: theologians, nuns, all sorts of helpers. And then one day they decide to be ordained priest. That means to be excommunicated, so to be thrown out from their job, their house, their convent, So they lose everything, even a place in which you're going to be buried when you're dead. So, in order to do that step, you need to be somebody with a certain mindset, because otherwise you would be crazy, you would never do it. And what I found in them is that there's something really clear. They knew why they were doing it. They knew what was right for them. They knew what they wanted, and they were not afraid to, lose everything to achieve it. And they wanted to be change. Most of them didn't only challenge the Catholic Church, but also nuclear weapons implants or School of Americas. There is a school for mercenaries. Many of them went to jail to do civil disobedience. So these are people that want to resist and want to go against what is wrong and are ready to sacrifice for it. So as a
Wow.
human being, I completely fell for that,
Oh yeah.
completely fell. In fact,
Oh yeah.
I was doing very long interviews. As a photographer, I was challenged because when you see them, They're just normal old ladies. They're not particularly odd looking or good looking or brave looking. They look like a grandma. They live in the suburbia. Some of them, because they spent their life in the convent, when they went through out, they didn't know how to cook. So they're eating like McDonald's ice cream and vitamin pills. If they don't even know how to cook an egg. So I was like, oh my God, how am I going to photograph something that is so powerful when they speak? But when you look at them, you just see like this large fridge that they have in suburbia. And when you open it, you have like this huge chicken with mayo. And there's nothing fancy about them. And I knew another photographer. I've photographed this before, and she flew them to New York. She dressed up them like bishops, Catholic bishops, and she made these, you know, almost fashion portraits of them. And they knew I didn't want to do that because, first of all, it was a lie. They never dress like priests because they don't want to be dressed like princes, like people with power.
Yeah, yeah,
They want to
yeah.
have a democracy. They don't want to have power. We want to be a priest that is for the people, not above the people. So they usually don't wear the collar. They don't dress in black. They don't talk about original sin, but about original blessing. You can pray with your entire body. You can pray with happiness. You don't have to feel bad about spirituality. So I couldn't cheat. I couldn't lie, and I couldn't turn them into puppets of the religion of my childhood. So I had to find a way to show their spirituality through pictures that were documentary pictures. And at first, I was, of course, doing reportage of all the events. Like the Pope comes to Philadelphia and they get arrested in front of him, stuff like that. But I thought it was a very small part of the story because you had to feel their spirituality. You had to feel what it feels to be a woman with some spiritual power. And so I spent years trying different things that were very simple, like, can you please pray in front of me and I'm just gonna make the best picture I can. And then I had two intuitions. One was collaborative portraiture. That means that maybe there was a way into a portrait to have some kind of very small performance that could reveal a secret about them. So the body was a site of investigation. I had to look at the body and look at everything with a new pair of glasses, with new eyes. And I remember at one point, for example, the light, a green light in a parking lot could be my God. God coming to us. It was like enhanced reality. I had to use everything that was offered to me to talk about, something that is not a stereotype. It's not a guy with a white beard living above a cloud, but could be any kind of energy around them. Um,
Mm.
and
Let's
so I
take a
was always,
look. Let's jump in.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I can open it. I have okay. Da, da, da.
You got me. So, like, let's get in. I'm so in. Let's take a look.
Okay, so this is the cover. The cover is an archival picture, but I used a lot of archival pictures too. I started using archival pictures in 2012 because when you met a woman and she's 80 years old, you need to find a way to actually show what happened before in her life. So our archival material was very important to me This is a drawing done in the 80s, that talks about how painful it was for some of them to be a nun. To make so so in 8 years, I really tried to develop all sort of strategies. So this is an example of the reportage I was doing at the beginning.
Yeah, this I can't help but notice this guy in the suit. He almost looks like security or like a secret agent or something. Fascinating figure. It's a good shot.
And this is another example of archival material. So it's like, your first Holy Communion.
Yeah.
And because,
So
I want to tell you
you
one thing,
are
because in 2012, I was taught at school that you cannot use other people pictures. The solution I found was to photograph actual objects. So I told
interesting.
myself, okay, I cannot use their pictures, but I can make pictures with their pictures inside. So all the archival
Mm-hmm.
material I used in the project, you actually get to see the objects.
Wow, I like that one.
And and collaborative portraits
So is this whole series done in the United States,
is
or did you go
done
somewhere else?
in United States, the Vatican in Rome, and
Okay.
Colombia in South America.
Oh
I
wow,
wanted to do also Europe and South Africa,
that would be a good idea.
because women priests are around 300 all over the world. So it's a very small number, but they are in many countries. Um,
Yeah.
but I have to say, after 8 years, um, I was afraid that I was overdoing it. I don't know how to say. Like, the project is already
Mm-hmm.
immense. We're talking about 20,000 photographs, and
Wow.
hundreds of hours of interviews, and hundreds of hours of video interviews. And I felt I was sitting above so much, material. It was very interesting for universities, of course, but I wasn't sure it was so interesting for my community, for my photography community.
Yeah, it seems like you had come to a point to where you had to start kind of putting it together. It's like put a frame around the research, and I've noticed a lot of I've noticed that you have to come to an end of the investigation, even though there's probably a lot more questions to ask. But it seems like you came to that place where you had to kind of start putting that stuff together, and I think it's quite interesting. And
And in
you
eight
know, I
years,
also
I
think it's kind of funny too
yes,
that you were told that you can't use other people's photos, but there's a very long tradition of using archival photos in work and kind of bringing in that stuff. But so I think you did a great job, kind of bringing it together, and I I kind of love
you,
that
and
unicorn motif too. So
yes, of course, I'm thinking about Jim Goldberg. I'm thinking about Susan Maiselas.
yeah,
She did it many years before,
yeah,
but I think ICP was a great school, but some of my teachers were very classic reportage,
sure, yeah,
and it's fine. And I think I had to grow outside the limits that they put
yeah,
on me. And I know today is very different. I teach at ICP, and I can tell that now they're much more interested in, all the contemporary narrative, non-linear narrative, objects, portraits,
yeah,
going behind the genre. But 15 years ago, at least some of my teachers were pretty tough, and it's true that ICP is the first place that exhibited the work, I think in 2015. But at the same time, in 2012, when they look at it, they said, "Oh, Julia, you, this is not okay. No magazine is gonna purchase it. It's too odd. You say this is a woman priest, but this is a man dressed like a woman in a pink dress in a bed. Why are you photographing your women priest in a bed?"
Yeah.
And I know that I wanted to build something very intimate with them.
Yeah.
So so it didn't matter their public role. I wanted to be private.
I love that.
I wanted to show their home, their things, their bodies, the way they really are. And in fact, I was doing this agreement with them that if you wanted to be inside the project, I had to spend 2 weeks living with you at your place. So I asked them a big commitment in order to be part of the project and complete openness. I didn't want them to be activists. I didn't want them to give me only the gold side. I wanted to see the dirt. I wanted to see the failure. I wanted to see the wounds. Most of them have been abused by priests or by their own fathers. And the one we're looking here, dressed like a nun, page 774, the archival picture, she's actually the daughter of her mother and their grandfather.
Wow.
So some of them had the most horrible stories, and I wanted to tell it all. You know what? I was thinking heroes. We always think of them as winners, as people that have all their shit together. They're strong, they're handsome, uh, they're amazing. But my heroes were wounded. These are
Yeah.
women that really
Mm-hmm.
were crucified during their
Wow.
life, but they were not defined by their trauma. They overcome the trauma. So for me, it was very important to show um, that they were down and then they were up, that they had to go through things. I didn't want to have a static
Yeah.
description. This is what they're supposed to be.
You know, what's amazing is that I'm kind of seeing the early beginnings of where you're going, where we're going to go next, because we're about to go see that next, but because we're kind of going through your evolution. But you answered my question, my main question, which was, why was it so important to kind of see the dirt, And you just gave me a great answer to that. So I love that definition of the heroes that you had just given to me. But I think a lot of us have a kind of ideal of what a perfect person is, or what
Yeah.
good looks like, and I'm always trying to challenge that definition, and I try to unpack that a lot all the time, and I think you're kind of in an attempt to do that here, and I think it's kind of interesting. Have you added any more to that answer, or and then we can kind of move to that next body of work, because I kind of see a connection to that, but I'm kind of curious to see how that kind of unfolded for you.
For example, in this picture, you see Caitlin, and she's the adoptive daughter of one of the women priests. Um, and you can see that she has a wound in her
Yeah.
neck. She's wearing actually a veil like a bride, and flowers, but those flowers are dry. And then she's in her pajama in a room. So there's so many odd things about this picture. And I hope that when somebody look at the picture like this, they have questions. They want to know more. I think a photograph is a strong photograph when it's a device for remembering, a device for imagining, and when you want to
Yeah.
understand more. And so I hope when I'm going to be done with the writing, then you're going to find out that she was, she's born by her mother getting raped, but she's still a very strong woman. And when you do a project, you do not realize a lot of things. Like I was aware of a lot of challenges, but I wasn't aware of a lot of unconscious things that I was obsessing with while I was doing it. And definitely complexity in people, and people being able to survive what happened to them and actually become much stronger and better human beings. It is something that is happening a lot in this book. Um, and and the other thing, for example, is to completely challenge my Italian classical view on religion. Sometimes when we have photography dealing with religion, people photograph religious people the way, we photograph giraffe in a zoo. This is what religious people do. These are religious props.
Yeah.
These are religious clothes. And I'm really proud of myself for having completely broke this way of looking at religion, and having obsessed how being spiritual felt, and also because I was experiencing the United States, the suburbia. I think in it really came I don't want to call it a Twin Peaks religion mood, okay, uh, but definitely there's something anxious about the place where they live. This is the picture of three religious people in the parking lot in San Diego. And to me, it became a labyrinth, and the green light became something unusual that make you wonder, you know.
Yeah. It's interesting for sure. After you got done with this project, you really started to kind of dive into new ideas and new concepts. And I'm curious, was it related to the traveling and I guess that's what my question is. Was it in the traveling? How did you find your way in Israel and Palestine? And how did that project kind of make its way into being? So talk to me a little bit about that.
I was living in the States since 2010, and I had a journalist visa, unlimited. But the problem is actually the government would take years to send the papers over. And I was told that I could leave the United States. But if I do it, I had to go through embassy again and ask again for my visa papers and start all over again. And I was so afraid to not get it again that I actually stayed in the States for 5 years, despite my father getting sick in Italy. Um, and I loved the States. I want to say it, they gave me a lot. But on the other side, I sort of start feeling homesick, but badly homesick. Like I would wake up in the middle of the night, and my nightmare was simply the Atlantic Ocean that would separate Europe from the States. And I started having a lot of nightmares. And in one of these nightmare, that was a recurrent nightmare, there was this guy and was in a house done with yellow rocks in a very dry place, but with a beautiful blue sea in front of him. And he was lighting a fire and he was telling me, come back home, come back home. And the only thing I knew, it wasn't Italy. And that was so puzzling. When I spoke to some of the women priests about this, they said, oh, Julia, that's Israel. God is calling you to Israel. And of course, I didn't believe it because I'm actually a very rational person. So that's also why I enjoy doing religious projects, because I usually don't get, I mean, I'm always doubting everything. So I'm a good observer. And, but when they said so, I thought that I could actually go back home to Italy, but I could do a project about another country that was Israel, that is the country, where all religion are. And I could play a little game. And this was the game. When you dream, if you see a horse, you think that it must have a meaning because you dreamed the horse, the white horse. But if you see a white horse in reality, it's just a white horse, right? It was there. It doesn't have any special meaning. And I ask myself, what if for 3 months I go to Israel and I make this game with my camera, that everything I see is God's will, because God exists. Yeah. And let's see if I discover God in 3 months. And actually I ended up being in Israel for a couple of years.
Wow. What a story. So there are some people that say that that what you see is just an illusion, is the illusion. So that horse you see in reality is actually just kind of your soul dreaming anyway. And so I think it's absolutely fascinating.
Well,
you've got to tell me more. It was an artistic
thing, so, of course. And
okay. Tell me more.
The clever photographer thought also, you know what, I'm going to do this project for 3 months. I'm not going to find God. So it's going to be, a project, an artistic project that is going to fail. That's so cool. I love it. That's what I said at the beginning. And to me, it's always amazing because every time I say something at the beginning of a project, I end up being so wrong. I mean, if you're open to the process, then the project is going to change so many times and it's going to take shapes that you never imagined. I love this because I can be dumb, but my project can be extremely, I hope, extremely clever, because it's a continued discovering. It's like, I put something on the ground and that thing talks back to me, and then we start a dialogue and I keep changing. But listening to my project is the one with some intelligence. I'm just a servant of the project. And well, now you're going to see this, but it changed so much.
Yeah, do you want to take a look?
Yeah, I think we can open it.
Please, come on. You got me already. Like, you're so good at this. Like, you pull me right in and I'm like ready to go. So it's amazing. But they call this word, this ability to see symbols and stuff like that. They call it synchronicity. And it's like the universe or God talking to you in a certain way to kind of give you messages, and you can have a really magical life if you look for meaning in things versus not seeing meaning in anything. And I think the fact that you kind of started on that premise is really, really interesting, and you kind of inspired me. Maybe I should do something like that. So I love that idea. So continue. Take me into this. Let's see where this
It
goes.
turned out to be a project in different chapters because I did different things. I did three things. The first one was to visit all the holy places in Israel, Palestine, and the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. And instead of looking at what is holy, the altar, the things that people go to see there, I look behind my shoulders. I look at all sort of things that were happening around me that were not the holy. And many times I will not even look through the camera while taking the photographs. Like I tried to be uh, as unconscious
Unattached.
and instinctive as
Yeah.
possible. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So okay, this is a selection. I
What an
usually show it
approach. It's
as
fascinating.
a grid, but these are all holy
Why do you
places.
say that? Why do you
I
show it as
mean,
a
it's
group?
oh well, I show it as a group first because I was not looking for um, images that were very strong by their own. I was looking at
Uh-huh.
this is a small selection, but for example, in an exhibition, I would do a wall, an entire wall, like a mosaic. This is
Yeah. Yeah.
this was found on the mountain where Jesus was discussing with the devil. Or this is the Tiberia Lake where Jesus actually walked on the waters. No, but it's true. I went to all
The
sorts of
irony in this image.
holy holy
It's
places,
amazing.
but I
Wow.
didn't look what you were supposed to look. You know, this is
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Canaan, where Jesus did the miracle of the wine, the water turning into wine. Uh, so for sure, it's a statement. To get to a place, and instead of looking for the holy thing, you look for trash, holes, spikes, people, and all sort of things. This is the
Wow.
mountain, where Jesus met the prophets, Elijah, Moses, and this was really trash in the grass, but it had the shape of the white vest. So
Wow.
it was an attempt, and I call it "You shall not tempt the Lord your God." Because I
Mm-hmm.
felt like I was tempting God. I thought
Why do you feel like
metaphysics
it's tempting?
is uh, is the force that physicality has. So again, I was looking at the material world. I was collecting trash from the street and build
Can I
stuff.
ask you, why do you feel like it's tempting?
Well, you're not supposed to ask God to prove its own existence. Well, here
Mm.
I'm trying to do that.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're if there is an intelligence in the world, and if I'm here and I'm available to you, force or energy or whatever you are, you know, drive my hand, show yourself
Mm.
to me. And so I think it became a way to experience the Holy Land that was different. Like if you go there and look for
Mm-hmm.
religious people, if you go there and look for the conflict, if you go there and look for certain journalistic stories, this became a sort of platform that would allow me to look at Israel in a very different way. Although, of course, you have war, you have religion. This is a house that was destroyed during the war with Syria. I took pictures of volcanoes, um, all sort of things. But it was a good beginning. I don't think I got
Mm-hmm.
like amazing strong photographs, but I loved the gesture. That's why I like the idea of having, in an exhibition, this giant wall with this mosaic
Yeah.
that you can drive through the pictures and see things that usually
Almost as if it's
we don't see.
like you experience them with the same intuition that they were taken with.
Yes,
I love that.
exactly. I want it to be
That's really, really
sort of an
interesting.
unconscious look. Of course, you imagine like Julia from ICP would never do that, 5 years before. So this also was telling me I was in a different
Yeah.
place.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's cool.
uh, then we have a second and the third chapter, but I show you before the last one that is called the New Jerusalem because it's the second I actually made. When I stopped looking at Israel this way, so in a very intuitive, chaotic way, interviewing a lot of people, doing a lot of writing, um, because I wanted people to drive me through the country through their holy books. And so I never read the Bible myself at that point in my life, and I would ask people to read the Bible to me or to tell me their favorite story in the Bible. And I discovered that the way the Bible is written is is not psychological; it's a mythical story. So you find characters doing all sorts of things, but you never know why, and it's never explained to you why they do what they do and why this is supposed to be read in a certain way. It's a very esoterical book if we think about it. But
For sure.
people will fill all the gaps. So people would tell me, my name was I think her name was Arabic because she's from Morocco, the woman we're looking at, and her name was Darkness in Arabic. And she said that my life was very very dark, but then I picked the name Sarah, the patriarch, the wife of Abraham. And then my life changed, and I became living like a Sarah. I became the wife of a man, American man that moved from the States to Palestine, that occupied illegally the land, that chopped the head of the people that didn't want us to be here, and now I'm the lady of this land. So
Mm.
people would tell me, using the Bible, their own story. And so I used it to make portraits of them. This man would talk about Adam and how it felt to, how could they felt to be the first man in the world to go beyond survival instinct. And so I was imagining,
Wow.
this first night on a fresh new world, and you don't know that the sun is gonna come, and you don't know, anything that is going to happen. You don't know what is spring or summer or winter. Um, and so these are large format collaborative portraits of people that in a way or the other believed to be one of a biblical figure. This is Samara. We lived together for a few months in Nablus. He's a nurse. And he had these old coins from the Ottoman Empire that his grandfather gave to him. And he became my Judah,
Mm-hmm.
that betrayed Jesus for these coins. Um, so this is the collaborative portrait part that became the last chapter of the work, and to me it was looking for God through imagination, And
Oh, that's
then
really interesting.
the documentary impulse kicked in, and I had two more chapters that are narrative chapters, documentary narrative chapters. The first one is called The Wolf Hill, and is the translation of a place that is in the Israeli settlements, and and I mean it's you're not gonna find the reportage, but it's definitely about the wolf that I witnessed in Israel and Palestine. So it's very much about settlements, it's about land grabbing, it's about war. When I was there, unfortunately, there was a Gaza war. Although it was for sure less cruel and terrific and tragic of what we're witnessing right now. But being in Israel at that time, it felt like walk on a radioactive land. And so this is a bit my emotional journey through a land that was conflicted and scary. I lived in Kiryat Arbat for a few months with a rabbi, and I had to be dressed like an Orthodox Jewish woman because otherwise they would not accept me. So the rabbi knew that I was a photographer, but nobody else. And I had to report my dreams to him every morning. So that's the kind of control they had of what I was doing. But I was able to, bring my wooden camera, my large format camera, to places that usually we don't see. Um,
So you
you
had to
know,
report your dreams?
yeah, they wanted to know everything I did during the day. So I had a guy that was, my a soldier that was with me all the time. But I'm glad he didn't find me intimidating. He thought I was a good person, and so he allowed me to do and to photograph so many things, like Palestinians, people getting arrested in Israel, land that was burned by Israeli settlers, all sort of things. I have to say. So it was not a very good soldier. I mean, according to them, because he allowed me to witness so much. And he has a crazy story because actually his son and his grandson were killed by Palestinians. But despite this, he spoke to me a lot and he always asked me, I need to understand why. I just, can't. A lot of my friends, they tell me there's nothing to understand. Those are terrorists. But I'm the one that lost his family in a terrorist attack, and I'm the one that want to understand why. What is happening? A lot of the things between Israeli and Palestinians is this invisibility wall. You have no idea what the other is thinking. So this soldier was amazing. He came to with me everywhere because he needed to understand for himself what we were witnessing. And so this was the day part of the control. And then every morning at breakfast, I had to report what I dreamed to the rabbi that wanted to know what I was really feeling inside. And I remember having amazing dreams. I remember the settlement we were was actually an island with all the ocean around us, and a giant fish was coming from very deep ocean and was trying to swallow our island. So I did have quite amazing dreams at that time.
That's absolutely
Um,
fascinating.
it has been very hard, I have to say. I
Yeah,
suffer so much witnessing the sufferance on both sides,
I can
and
imagine.
I loved, a fanatic settler on one side and I loved, Palestinians family that were kidnapped and killed on the other side, and the only thing I could do was to really wish for forgiveness, because if you don't forgive, war will keep going on, and even at a time of peace, you could see war, and you could see this very toxic energy all around you. Um, so this chapter is dedicated to that conflict. Even if you never see the conflict right away, but uh, these are the places that I witness, and the people that I witness, and the pain that I witness.
Well, thank you for sharing
And
that.
there is a bit of text, you know.
Yeah.
I did a lot of writing at that time. In the website, you find just a little piece. That is an example. But when I imagine a final book, I really imagine something with text. It's not that photography is not powerful enough, but I love when you have good photography and you have good writing, and the two
Yeah, I
can
agree.
bring you like in a third mind, in a third place. They open a new dimension. And because I had this project that was about the conflict, looking at my pictures, I saw something different also. And so there was another chapter that I called The Bride of the Sea. Bride of the Sea is Jaffa, is the place in Tel Aviv where Palestinian people were kicked out in 1948. But on the other side, it became something physical to me. Like I was looking for love, I was looking for brides. I start collecting archival images of brides, for example, because it was amazing to me to see all these European women escaping from the Holocaust in Europe, getting to Israel to start a new life, getting married, you know. So they have a dream of love, but then they get conflict. So I think that to have the conflict and to not have the love would be one-sided. So this is, for example, archival material mixed with photographs that I made during my stay. I always felt that my romantic Israel was the less powerful chapter, and I wanted to go back and to do more. But then, actually, time passed, and I changed as photographer, and so I decided to let it stay. But at that time, my idea was to go back. I wanted to go back, for example, in 2020 and do more, but then COVID hit, and so I'm thinking that one thing that I would love to do is to go back and look for my people now after 10 years
Yeah,
and see what
I
happened
would
to
agree.
them. And then again, you simply let it sit and develop. And usually, with my work, I see that things take shape in a long time. I'm a very slow photographer, not so slow in the making of the photographs, but I'm very slow in organizing them and looking for them and think about installations. The Bride of the Sea was shown in Reggio Emilia during the photography festival, and I created a sefer, the Torah. There is a roll.
Yeah,
The Bible is rolled.
yeah, I know what you
So
mean.
I made one, and I attach it at the wall, and then I start taking the paper and bring it down for 2 meters and 70 centimeters. So you could see the beginning of it, but instead of showing a real Sefer Torah, I actually made my own. And it was made with writing and all these archival pictures of brides.
That's cool.
and it was all about love and love in the Bible, love in the diaries of the people that I met, both on Palestinian side and Israeli side. What we're looking now is a Palestinian bride, and it's very special because she's actually wearing, in Palestine, you need two wedding dress, one for the public, and you're completely covered, and one for your husband and your mom, and you can be half naked, you can show your hair and so on. So her name is Zaida Ramadan, and she allowed me to photograph her with a private wedding dress. It was a very big deal, no? But
Mm.
she's a Palestinian,
Wow.
beautiful, beautiful woman. And this is a baby in the only Palestinian hospital for children. And so
Wow.
several stories getting tangled all
They're
together.
all colliding, and you can kind of see that few years of experience there, and the different things that you're thinking about and confronting within yourself, the complexity. It's pretty amazing, and that romantic version of Israel kind of crashing down, but then you're also asking questions and challenging tropes, and it's really interesting. I'm kind of curious. So how do you feel like that experience led you to the next project?
Well, after the experience in Israel, I really moved back to Italy at that point, and I wanted to publish my work in a form of book. Like I did so many exhibitions and a few fanzines and catalogs, but I really wanted to do the photo book because I that's why I got into photography. I wanted to do literature with photography, so I wanted to do books. But it was also the moment of the photo book fever. And so you would go to any publisher saying, I think I have an idea for a very strong book. And they'd be like, oh, do you? Huh. You know? What is it about? Religion. Oh my God, that's so uncool. And well, I actually got a big yes from one amazing publisher once, and but 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 then I think I got kind of scared because it was at the very end of my looking for a publisher journey, and I was turned down from so many that when this last publisher said, well, yes, the photography is there, let me have the writing so I can decide, I never sent the writing. So I have to also say, maybe this book was never published also for my fault. I don't know. But I'm mentioning this because after that moment, I entered in a very big crisis. And I didn't touch my machine, my camera, for 1 year. And start, I stopped going out with other photographers or with the photography community. Didn't go to festival, didn't go to galleries, didn't go to aperitivos in Milano. And I actually start going to other places. And when people would ask me, which is your job, I would lie and say I was a teacher, but I never mentioned photography. And it was a horrible year. It was not depression, and I think it's important. Maybe I was a bit burned down after the Israeli experience. I should give me that. But I think it was a very deep crisis because I always said I wanted to be free as a photographer, but I was not going to do what was in fashion, that I, want to give myself time, that isn't important. It's not important if you're not good. But after my attempts of publishing the books, I felt I was sitting on like a poker game, but the game was tricked. I couldn't win in any way. And people values things that I didn't value. I mean, I felt it was too much superficiality, too much, people doing what other people like, um, and also I felt I wanted to have some recognition because I worked so hard. I got sick and poor and homeless for that project. And I really wanted people to say, "Oh, that was totally worth." And it didn't happen, according to me, because I didn't publish the book. Uh, but I'm glad I had this terrible year because actually it allowed me to get on the other side, to come back to photography so much stronger. A lot of the things that I said I had for myself was wishful thinking. I wanted to be free, but hidden inside, I still needed the recognition. In other words, I still wanted to be famous. And if you ask me, that's such a horrible reason to do anything in life. It means you're an egocentric, you're paranoid. The best people I know, they don't want to be famous, they want to be good people, or they want to be good at what they do. So I think that the last traces of egocentrism and caring about my career and wanted to be successful, that year I was really able to solve it for myself and to focus on things that were much more important to me, like the teaching. Like I realized that teaching photography, it was my love, was a very deep and big love, and was very important. So I shouldn't felt guilty if I was teaching and not making a project, for example. And the other thing is that I also told myself that really uh, every time I got a bit of success, like people would recognize me, or I actually would feel uncomfortable with it. And that I didn't want to live in a big city, but I wanted to live in a small city, that I wanted to be a normal person, that I wanted to be an artisan, that I didn't need to keep doing digital photography for magazines because that's going to be, successful. But I was allowed to let it go and just work with black and white analog photography because that's what I wanted you know so that year it was I was miserable, but it laid the ground for me coming back to photography as an adult person and somebody that is completely at peace with what he's doing, and he's saying, you know what, if you find something in my work, I'm really happy, but if you ask me, I'm still working on it. I'm trying to be stronger every day in sharing what really I care, and sharing the journey of being a human being on this planet. And I don't think I deserve any medal or any success. I'm a worker. I love to work. I read once that animals can be territorial or hierarchical. Hierarchical means that I'm gonna feel good about myself only if I'm better than you. But if I'm a territorial animal, I'm gonna feel good about myself because of the water, because of the trees, because of the moon in the sky. And you know what? I'm a territorial animal. So I want to feel good because I'm surrounded by photography, because I live this passion, because I have ideas for my projects. And I think this made me strong enough to pick the subject of my last project, that is death. So if everything I did so far was uncool, I think I hit the ceiling now. Nothing is more uncool than death, you know. And but I was not afraid. Some colleague at the beginning told me, "You're never gonna show it. People will not want to see it." Magazine will not publish it. You're doing 8 by 10 large format classical photography on a topic that it's awful, and make people cry, and so you're gonna be you and your project, and people are gonna say that you bring unluck, you know because you touch this death topic. And I didn't care, and I was strong enough to keep doing what I thought was beautiful. So this is a
It's
I know
interesting.
it's a
And you kind of, you went through, there's this idea, and it happens in all great stories, where the main character or the person goes through a egoic death, and you experienced the death of the ego in some way, and you kind of shifted your focus, and I think that's really interesting, don't you
It's
think?
the best thing that happened in my life. I think I worked a lot, to settle down myself, forgive, forget, not be ashamed of myself, and when this happened,
It's interesting.
I felt so much better about my photography and what I'm doing. I think I even became a better teacher.
It's cool. It's amazing. So take me through it. Show me how you kind of worked with this idea.
Okay, so the title is Death is a Photograph, and it started as a project about mourning. This is one of the first. This is the very first picture of the project. It was done in 2021, and what happened is that during COVID, of course, each of us has lost somebody that was meaningful and important, and I did as well. And so I found myself going around for rivers around the city I was living in, Milano, at that time, and I would meet strangers, and instead of doing small talk, how's the weather, how you feel today, I would actually start talking with these people to really know their experiences and what they've been through. And I would share my own experience as well. Because as a documentary photographer and a portrait photographer, I always saw that if you do not open up first, it's very difficult for a stranger to trust you. So I would open up first, and then I would, listen to them and make a simple portrait by the river. And in this particular case, this is Davide Giardino for his friends. His name is Jardin, and I asked him, can you be my self-portrait? I lost a student of mine and a friend. Can you be my self-portrait? And he said, you know what? I can cry for you. I'm gonna do anything for you. And it was so powerful, that collaboration, what we did together, simple but powerful, that it convinced me that I wanted to do more of it. But at first, it was just,
Interesting.
strangers by the river that had lost somebody that they loved. And then it was not enough. And I thought, you know what, if there is a river between death and life, can I actually go through all these points, that they touch each other and see what happens? Because my friend committed suicide during COVID, I was reading a book from Dimitri Paulin that was about suicide. It was about the suicide of a kid that he knew. And it's such a terrible book because We spoke before about playing with ideas, and I think he does. He allows himself in every sort of territories that usually we do not allow ourselves to go to. And but he's also asking a lot of meaningful questions. And one of them is it true that when human beings are closer to death, they're like a lighting bulb that for a second is going to emit a very strong light, much stronger than their power. And I wanted to see that. I wanted to see how we live close to death, what happened to us, how we deal with it. And so I start making collaborative portraits of all sorts of people with different experiences. So this is Giovanni Stucchi, and he had an heart attack, very bad heart attack, and he was dead for a little while, and then he was in coma. And so I went to photograph the scar on his chest, interview him, and especially asking about near-death experiences. But the more I asked about his death, the more he kept telling me about the very first breath when he came back to life, because he remembered it. And he would say, I know what it means to resurrect. And so when it came to do the portrait, I knew I really wanted that breath. And I'm shooting with an 8x10 large format camera. Usually I have a long exposure time because I shoot inside. And so I tried a few times to get that breath, but also I learned as a photographer that you don't want to stick with your first idea. You want to follow her like she was a dancer that brought you to the dancing room, but then maybe you also want to dance with other people and check things around. And actually, the final photo, you cannot see the breath, you cannot see the scar because he's actually having his hands on the chest. But it's the photo I loved the most because I felt that in this photo, he felt to me dead and alive at the same moment. And I felt he was absorbed also in that moment, in that thinking. Um,
Give me a little bit about what he said about that experience, remembering his first breath. What did he tell you in that moment?
well, he said that he was dreaming to be in wet soil, and hands were pulling him down to be drawn in that mud, but also there was one hand that was pulling him up, and and then he woke up and he found himself completely like with a tube. So you are attached to a machine that is keeping you alive, but you're not actually breathing. The machine does it for you. So he started looking at the doctors with his eyes because he couldn't move, and kept staring and moving the eyes to ask for them to remove the machine. And the doctor said, I can't remove the machine now, Giovanni. I'm afraid you're going to die. And he kept, doing all sorts of things with his eyes to ask for them, please remove the machine. So what they did was to prepare a second set. So they would remove the machine, but in few seconds, if he was not going back to breathe by himself, they would attach the machine again. And he said, I was awake when they removed everything. It's also very painful when they remove it, after months. He said, I knew I had one shot to keep, to have this very strong breath. And he said, and I did, and it worked, and it felt really like coming back to life. Like when I was attached to the machine, I wasn't really alive yet. And No,
Whoa.
I mean, I'm gonna cry now
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
because
whoa,
I'm
whoa,
gonna
whoa.
bring you
That is
to a few
that is
pictures of
something.
people that had very strong experiences with death. Mhm.
Wow, that is like that's that's a powerful story. That is something that's you got me on that one. That hit me. So like
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
tell me more. I'm kind of I'm kind of blown away by kind of this little journey that you're on, and it's fascinating that you find yourself here, and you are expressing yourself in this way, and so it's quite an amazing place to be.
y- yeah. So, for example,
It's
this is
amazing.
Chantal Raimondi, and she's a medium. So I didn't want to only to photograph, people working in the deaf sector, or people that have been deaf, people that are dying. I wanted also to have ghostbusters or mediums talking to purgatory souls and dead people around them, or people doing very dangerous sport, people that had transplants from other people that are dead. So the research field is very big. So to give an example, the next thing I'm going to photograph is suicide in jail. Okay. So I'm collecting all sorts of experiences, and I'm doing something very different, almost opposite of what I did in my very first project. That is, you look at one thing and
Yeah.
you create a world to just talk about that thing, you know, spirituality in women in the Catholic Church. And then you have, pictures that I hope very interesting, but to me it doesn't matter if they don't stand on their own, because you're gonna have 200 photographs to get the story. Right now I'm doing something completely different. You have one picture to get one story.
Yeah.
So it has to be like concentration of emotion, energy. I don't want it to be a cliche, but it has to be iconic, the best I can. It's like it has to be a killer. So for every story, you get only one photograph. And to me, that I was, the one passionate about narrative, it's been a very, very hard exercise. Also because sometimes we have amazing stories and you want to show so much, but I think the project would become impossible. So I have to remove, have to show you as less as possible in order to be able to create connection between a man that is gonna die, a man that is seeing souls and spirits around himself, another one that is ready to die for a sport, once one that has lost somebody that is. I'm looking for the how do you say the common thing, or the secret, what something that is gonna hold this chain together. And I
Yeah.
don't know yet what it is, but I think I try to sense it, So this woman, Chantal, well, she's very spiritual, but she's not even conservative. It's like a middle age um, spirituality. It's almost archaic, medieval, and she would talk about saints getting burned or killed and having pain in their bodies. The Catholic faith can be very physical, and so when I saw that there was this place, I felt she was gonna be my saint that is gonna burn one day. And I've also felt that she's fair, but she's vulnerable, and there is so much empty space around there, and beautiful Italy for a second becomes almost dry place. And so I really try to condense a lot of feelings.
I love I love how you're like packing in so much story into one image, and I think it's just absolutely fascinating. And
Talk a bit about this one because you can see my camera in the picture. Can you?
oh yeah, it's gorgeous.
So I'm using a
I'm
large
kind of
format camera
jealous, you know.
to photograph
I love it.
a large format camera, that is taking a photograph. And to me, it was important that my camera was in the picture because this is a peculiar thing that I and so when this happened, I want people to know. I asked certain people that deal with death on a daily basis to imagine the day they die, how they die, or their funerals. So in this case, she's a necrophore. So she buried dead people, she cleaned dead bodies, and she's a young woman. And I asked her, and she said, I wanna pretend it's my funeral. So I'm not gonna do anything. I'm the documentary photographer, so I don't put people in certain things. I don't carry props. I tell people, set things up the way you want them to be, and then I'm gonna guide you through the experience. So she actually dig a hole in the ground. She brought stones, flowers. She chose the place where she was going to bury. She asked her friends to come, and at this kind of fake funeral. And so at first, it starts very fake, of course. Um, but the goal is to actually guide them through the situation until until they feel something. And I was very happy with this one. Well, first because I enjoy the photograph. I think it's really strong, and the people are very natural, and they cried because when stories are very important, facts are important, stories are super important. And so they were living in a story that would make them think of reality, what will happen. And so I witnessed with the second large format camera everything that was taking place.
Yeah, it's
So
interesting.
this is going to be one side.
Technically, it's I really like how the background fades away. You lose the depth. It's almost illustrative in a way, and I really, really enjoy that. But it's a photograph because it's just way too detailed. But
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
really interesting, and I really, really like
because
it.
we said one picture per story, they have to be amazing. Like we're printing them for
Yeah.
Cortona 1 meter for 1 meter 20, so pretty big,
Wow,
you know,
that's
and they're
really big.
holding very well. 8 by 10 large format is amazing, and
Oh yeah, it is. It really is.
you could do them even bigger. Like the lab wanted to do a test and print them 3 meters long, like it's double my size. So I wanted them to have this iconic look. I don't know how to say, almost like you're looking at something from the Renaissance. They have to be
Yeah,
striking,
yeah.
beautiful. They don't have to be depressing.
Timeless.
And
Yeah,
so I really
yeah.
struggle to have the right light and the focus and everything has to be perfect.
Yeah.
And I also took photographs inside the darkroom because I felt there was something similar between the place they take care of the dead and the darkroom. These
Hmm.
tools and metal trays and also the alchemy. Things get transformed in those places. They don't stay the same. This is another medium with her daughters. This is a anatomical theater in Padua that was built in the 1595, and it's interesting because it has the shape of an eye. You would have the dead body at the center, and then all these people around looking at the dead body to study.
And they're standing on those ledges?
Yes,
Oh
very
my
tiny
gosh.
place, very
So
tiny.
you literally have, it's just, they're all kind of stacked. That's, I can actually imagine that room just filled like an egg of people just all looking down. It's
Yes,
fascinating. It's really really fascinating.
and it's a tiny place, very tiny, because all of them must be able to see the details of the dead body because they're there to do
Yeah.
anatomical studies. And so it's crazy how small it is, but how many people you could fit in there. And so I'm looking also at the places
Hmm.
of death. This is another one of, she lost her friend when taking her portraits in a river. I also went to a few museums looking for symbols and strange things, and I have found so many. I'm using very little of them right now because I don't want the project to become this sort of weird objects. But I made a rule for myself:
Yeah.
no cemeteries and no skulls in this project
Hmm.
because that's what you expect to see.
Yeah, of course. It's,
So I want to
I
show
think
what
you,
we
I
don't
think I
know.
like that. You're not looking at the symbols of death. You are exploring the relationship to it.
Yeah,
You don't want to pull like pull in too many motifs that kind of make it cliche. And it's really good.
yes. And well, this is not, it's not a great picture. It's not actually my favorite from this session, but I shot it recently, and I'm still pondering on the ones I'm gonna pick, like the final one when I'm gonna choose. This was the hardest thing I ever done in my life, and I photographed, killers in Palestine, and I photographed, Giovanni, very very terrible stories. I photographed an old woman 2 weeks before she died. So I felt, I was strong, but when I met Alina, I completely collapsed because she's in her 30s, uh, and she has 6 months of life left, and she doesn't want to die. I mean, before in the project, I always photograph survivals or, people that suffered, but they're here. But Alina was the first person that is fighting to stay alive, and she had to deal with the fact that, this war is gonna end and she's gonna disappear. And she looked at me and she said, now you have to photograph my body, my living body, because you're gonna witness that once I was here
Hmm.
before disappearing forever. So it's been really,
Mm-mm-mm.
really
Wow.
a major shift in the project. Okay, It became very
I
difficult
can
because,
imagine.
for example, technically, I screwed up so many sheet of films because I was so moved, and I think I have a good technique now after 15 years when I do large format, but I ended up doing silly mistakes because I was really really moved, and also I didn't want to cry in
Yeah.
front of her. I wanted to be strong, and because she was strong. The other the other thing is that I realized there was nothing I could say. In all other experiences with death, you know, your mother's suicide, you've been dead for 15 minutes, you know. I always had something to say, but when death is really coming to somebody that doesn't want to die, there's nothing you can tell. I mean, to me, it was really like
You know,
witnessing radioactive uranium in front of me. All words collapsed and disintegrated. Um,
there's a finality to death. There's an end. It's a pure ending. It's a stop, and or at least
yes,
that's what we can perceive here. When you talk to a medium, there is no finality to it, but for the body there is. There is a finality to it. I think what's interesting about this particular one is the anticipation of that finality. It's you're hitting me on so many levels today. It's you are something else. You the things you think about, the things that pull your attention, the things you try to capture, they go far beyond the how do you say it? You go beyond the surface, or at least you try to.
I tried.
You know, uh, yeah, you know, and I think that's the best way I can put it. You know, um, there's always this question of truth in photography. Are we photographing something that is true? And so many people use it as it's kind of a trope, and so many people write about it, and they kind of challenge the idea of the truth in photography, or the image itself. And I see you chewing at the edges of that. You're kind of flipping it on its head, and in as many ways as you can, you know, and you're embracing chance. You are embracing the unknown. You're challenging definitions. It's a fascinating journey. I'm I wish I had more time with you today. Maybe I'll have you on again. But wow, you've blown me away, and I'm sure my audience feels the same way. You know, and so when do you plan on showing this? Because I feel like you're shooting in preparation for something. So there is going to be a conclusion per se, but don't you feel like this is something bigger, like you had in the Ordination project or even the Israel project? Do you feel like this is one of those things that, yeah, you have a show coming up, but you're preparing for something, but don't you feel like this is gonna keep going for you?
Yes, well, I said yes to Cortona to show a little bit of the project because I think you cannot turn down one of the biggest festival in Italy, you know, saying, I'm not done, sorry. But definitely, no, no, come on, you cannot.
That's true.
But
Yeah, you can't.
definitely, I see it going for a long time, for a long time. So the next thing I told you is going to be suicide in jail, and then actually, because also I suffered so much with the last stories I witnessed. Actually, I wanted to do something crazy, maybe, but I want to photograph with my large format camera 8 by 10 a a baby that is just born, you know, it's coming out. because I'm always looking at us, that we're gonna disappear, but I wanted to see somebody that is actually coming from nothing, that is new to the world. And also, I want to do more places as well. What happened in the portraiture, if you look at the ordination portraits, you see that space is used as a narrative thing. So you find, where they live, the kind of things they have, so which kind of people they must be. I'm using it really to define the person, while in the death project, the places are almost empty, but they're always three-dimensional. Like I became obsessed with the space that is around the person when I'm portraying the person. And in many of these portraits, the person is becoming smaller and the space is holding them. And I think it's also part of the journey. So I really want to see what's going to happen with also landscape. Um,
It's
Don't know
really
if it makes
interesting.
sense. To me, I think a little bit because
No,
when we
no, it
disappear,
is.
what's left is the world, right? So it's
Well,
like I'm coming
yeah.
back to the world.
Well, it's an interesting question, you know. Yes, do plants experience death? Do when you look at it at a large scale, at a cosmic scale, you see this cycle of regeneration, and so you see these patterns of absorption and regeneration and absorption and regeneration, these cycles of abundance actually, and but yet as a human we don't experience that, we don't actually see it, and so we've almost made it a myth, and all of our great religions kind of try to help us come to terms
Yes.
with that. And so it's not a surprise that you've ended up here. It's kind of the natural place to end up there. And so I'm quite fascinated to kind of see where you end there. And so I would offer another moment here. The look for the symbology here is you had the death of the ego, which you went through, the end of the life that you were kind of experiencing, and so now you're ending here, and I think that might be another place to explore. But wow, this was a fascinating episode, and I think you have just added another level to this conversation, to the what we're trying to do here, and this is kind of where we're going, and how you construct images and the things that you think about. And I only have one more question for you, and it's quite a practical question, believe it or not. And I have a lot of people here that are image makers here, and they're trying to make their way as artists. And I'm kind of curious if you have any advice for anyone out there that's trying to make their way as image makers.
Well, to be on fire,
Mm-hmm.
like to really follow their passion, whatever it is. To not try to fill, to fill everybody expectation. To not try to fit in the community. To have real relationships in the community. It's better, to know one photo editor but have a real relationship than to go to a party with 50 but nobody cares, you know. So to be real, to be passionate, and also to accept that it's a marathon. It's gonna take a long time for good things to happen, not a fluke, and uh, and that is unreasonable. I mean, we're crazy. I remember when I finished ICP, I put this sentence on the door of my garderobe. It's easy. I don't know. 1 second, I wanted to remember it properly. It takes real lovers to be silly. Everybody can be passionate about something, but it takes real lovers to be silly. And we, as artists, have to be the most silly of all. It's not enough to be passionate about photography. You have to love it to death. To death. That's what I think.
It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. You have given me so much to chew on today. This was an awesome episode, and it was an absolute joy to have you on the show today. So thank you so much for coming on. This is a great moment for you to kind of tell everybody how they can connect with you. If you have an Instagram, a web page, this is that place for you to share with people how they can connect with you.
It's my website is juliabianchi.com, and my Instagram is my name, nausicaaguilabianchi.com, and if you're Italian, my school is thesoulindthemachine.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again. I had a blast with you today, and maybe we'll have you on again to dive a little deeper into how your subjects are expanding. But I don't think 2 hours was enough. So once again, thank you for coming on.
No, thanks to you, really. I hope I did good, because I felt I wanted to speak, but also I was a bit rusty with my English, and I felt also shy, so I hope it was interesting.
I think you did a great job. So even at that, the passion came through, and thanks again. To all those that have made it this far, thank you so much for joining us on the Urbanaut Podcast. If you like content like this, please like, share, and comment down below. All of that helps us with the algorithm. And also hit that subscribe button if you love this episode. I know it was an extra special one for me, and I really enjoyed it. If you want to take it a step further with your support, please consider becoming a subscriber. You can actually join us on the Patreon page. We're adding more and more content to that so that you can engage with us on a deeper level. We're coming up with new ideas all the time on how to enhance the subscriber benefits. So please consider becoming a subscriber over there. And as always, we'll see you next time.